My question is to the Prime Minister.
This is Angus Taylor. He's the Liberal Party's shadow treasurer, and he's about to ask the government a question.
Prime Minister, how much higher is the cash rate today compared to when you came into government? How much more are Australians paying on a typical mortgage as a result?
The Reserve Bank said prior to the election they foreshadowed interest rate increases. Now, if those opposite want to argue that if the government had not changed, if the Australian people had not voted for change on the 21st of May, then interest rates would be the same, then they are just kidding themselves.
He seemed quite proud of his contribution, but I want to run through why it's a deliberately misleading line of questioning. The Reserve Bank of Australia, or the RBA, sets the cash rate target, which then influences the interest rates in the market. This cash rate target was sitting at a record low of 0.1% before May 2022, but the RBA has been lifting the rate each month since then, to 1.85% in August. What Angus Taylor is trying to do is suggest that the Labor government is responsible for these interest rate hikes. But there's a few problems with that argument. The first is that the RBA is independent from the government. Anthony Albanese or Scott Morrison, or whoever the Prime Minister is, doesn't get to direct what happens to the interest rate. This has been the case since the RBA was established in 1960 as an independent central bank. Despite this, interest rate changes have been used as a political weapon for decades. The second problem with Angus Taylor's argument, and the one that exposes the hypocrisy of it all, is that the cash rate started going up before Labor won the election, which is a bit of an annoying roadblock to the whole narrative. As early as April this year, the RBA started warning that it would be raising rates earlier than expected to try and combat increasing inflation. The first rate rise happened on the 3rd of May, before the federal election. At the time, the coalition government desperately reminded the public that this had nothing to do with them.
Well, the Governor and the Board of the Reserve Bank are independent of government and they take decisions based on the economic data.
What today is about is what Australians are seeing as a result of our economy coming out of this pandemic.
Scott Morrison even pleaded for the rate rise not to be politicised.
You know what? It's not about politics. It's not about politics.
It's funny how quickly they forget their own advice. The reality is that the RBA makes its own decision. And rightly or wrongly, they've decided that it's time to raise interest rates. So back to Angus Taylor. The reason I wanted to bring this up is because we need to expect better from our political parties. A weak opposition means less accountability for the government of the day. Instead of asking a proper question, the alternative treasurer chose to play political games with interest rates. But then, I'm not really surprised by Angus Taylor. And that's where I was going to end the video. But then Karen Andrews, the Liberal Party's Shadow Minister for Home Affairs, posted this video on social media.
Every time Labor get elected, Australian home buyers pay for it. When Mr Whitlam was elected, interest rates were 7%. And now with Mr Albanese, it's happening again. Interest rates have gone up 3 times in 3 months. In fact, interest rates are increasing at the fastest rate since Mr Keating was Prime Minister. The simple fact is that every time Labor get elected, every time, Australian home buyers end up paying for it.
Authorised by Karen Andrews, LNP, Varsity Lakes.
I'm not sure she realises that the election is over. Someone needs to tell her to stop spending our money making cheap and misleading political ads. Speaking of the election and Karen Andrews, I might end up making a video on her election day asylum seeker incident, given more information has now been released about it. But until then, thanks for watching.